Burnley, located in Lancashire, UK, is a market town surrounded by the breathtaking Pennine countryside. The town boasts a rich history and offers numerous activities to enjoy. The beautiful landscape serves as an ideal setting for hiking, cycling, horseback riding, and much more. Among the people who called this place home was 33-year-old Katie Kenyon. Katie was a kind, loving woman who was completely devoted to her 2 children, a son and a daughter she cherished deeply. She had a love for animals and was very close to her family, always making time for others. On April 22, 2022, a single word in a text message would raise concerns for her family. At 12:18 p.m. that day, Katie's daughter received a message from her. "I love you and I'm sorry. Ring your dad. He will be looking after you for a while from today. I need to get help so I can be a better person for you and your brother. Please know I love you and I'm not upset with you. Sorry I couldn't tell you about it. If your dad won't look after you, Andy will always have your back. Remember, ring your dad or Andy." One thing in the text message stood out immediately. The spelling of the word "while" was missing the H. Katie never spelt it this way. Another message was sent to her son saying, "Hey dude, I love you and I'm sorry. You need to ring your dad. He will be looking after you from today. I need to get help. It's not you. I love you. Will you look after your sister? And no, Andy will always have your back. Get your dad to come and get you while I'm gone. If he won't look after you, get him to take you to Andy." Again, the word "while" was incorrect. Katie's mother Dawn also received a text message from her at 1:42 p.m. Said, "This is the bravest thing I've ever had to do. I need to find some peace and sort my mind out. So with the 6Ks Andy gave me to pay the debt off, I'm being free for a while until I figure all this shit out." Just like the other 2 messages, the word "while" was missing the letter H. A text message had also been sent to Andrew Burfield, who was Andy in the text messages to her children. Said, "I want you to know I'm truly sorry for everything." Andrew Burfield and Katie Kenyon had had an on-off relationship for several years. Dawn, Katie's mother, sent a message to her sister saying, "Katie's walked out on the kids." This was completely out of character for Katie. She was an utterly devoted mother and her family knew she would never go away and leave her children behind. At 5 p.m., Dawn contacted Sarah and Jenny, Katie's sisters. Jenny got in touch with Andrew to see if he knew where she was. He said he had no idea. He told Jenny he was at work that day and she had gone to his house to drop her card and keys through the letterbox before going to a clinic to get treatment for her anxiety. What he was saying didn't add up, so Sarah and her boyfriend Anthony went to Andrew's house. Andrew lived on Todmorden Road, and when the pair arrived to talk to him, they saw her white Ford Fiesta parked outside his house which still had her belongings inside. But Katie was nowhere to be seen. Andrew was not cooperative with Sarah and Anthony and he ended up calling 999. He told the operator, "There's a guy here threatening me. He's kicking my door in. I don't know his name. He's a friend of my girlfriend. He's standing in the foyer. I'm going to barricade the door." The police soon arrived on scene and Sarah and Anthony spoke with them. They explained that Katie was missing and that all these messages had come through from her phone. A missing persons investigation was immediately launched. The search started at Andrew Burfield's home. He was cooperative with the police and gave them ideas as to where she could be, including this clinic she had allegedly gone to. He showed the officers the message she had sent him and let them look around his home. He got the ladders from his Ford Transit van so they could check the attic and joked, "Do you want to look in my van too?" He had also sent her several voice notes asking her to ring him, and he had also sent a message to Katie's son on Instagram. He said to her son that Katie had decided to go away for a while and asked him to care for her dog, with the dog's name Indy being spelled incorrectly. As news of her disappearance began to spread, missing posters were circulated with a description of her. She had last been seen wearing black leggings, flip-flops, a white and blue top, and a blue cardigan. One thing that was deeply concerning was that her phone had been permanently disconnected. 60 specialist officers from 4 police forces were involved and searches were carried out to try and find her. The hunt involved police and fire service officers, dog teams, mounted police, mountain rescue volunteers, and drones. The task before them was huge. The area to search was vast and dense, including a forest that made up nearly 5 square miles. Her sister Sarah wrote on Facebook, "It is now a waiting game. We have done everything we can, searched everywhere and contacted everyone." Then a witness came forward. Police said that a woman who matched Katie's description was seen getting into a silver Ford Transit, then accompanied by a male, and they issued an appeal for anyone who had seen anything similar to come forward. The following day, Saturday 23rd, Katie's sister Jenny sent Andrew a message. "Andy, I think you know a hell of a lot more than you're letting on. I have read over the messages Katie sent to her kids, and she doesn't even spell like that or speak like that, which is what the kids have also said. Katie knows how to spell and mentioned about you having dyslexia, which makes sense to the spelling. You sent them texts. You know where Katie is. The police will trace where she was from the last message sent. Doesn't add up how she would drop her car, her keys, her bank card at yours, but no phone and none of her other bank cards. It's about time you came forward and started telling some truth now." Andrew replied, "I know you're worried and upset, but you really can't be throwing accusations at me like that. I had all that last night with Anthony and Sarah. I thought we might work together on this. That's why I gave you my number. I reported her missing last night as I said I would. I gave the police all Katie's things she posted. This is worrying enough without you adding to it. The police searched my house last night, so I think we should leave it down to them now." Jenny replied, "Still doesn't make any sense, Andy. Yeah. We'll leave it there, and hopefully CCTV will give us answers." And sure enough, the CCTV did start to provide some. Cameras had shown her arriving on Todmorden Road and getting into his van. They were then seen at a McDonald's drive-thru. As the van drove along the A670, a camera showed the pair sitting in the front seat. This was the last confirmed sighting of Katie Kenyon. Mobile phone data showed that her phone had pinged off of several towers heading towards the forest of Bowland. It also showed the phone traveling back. But a camera showed there was now only one person in the van, Andrew Burfield. That day at 3:45 p.m., the police headed back to Todmorden Road and Burfield showed them the messages on his phone. When the police returned at 5:30, the SIM card had been removed and put into another phone. He had also lit a fire, which was unusual given that it wasn't that cold. Andrew Burfield was subsequently arrested on suspicion of kidnap. He was taken to Greenback Police Station and the first of 4 interviews began. But who exactly was Andrew Burfield? He was 50 years old and a father of 2 and worked as a handyman in Burnley and would work on different properties. Burfield was described as isolated and friendless. He had also had run-ins with the law. He had been jailed in 2001 for attempting to pervert the course of justice. He had also been accused of stealing his boss's car and selling it for £2,700, but was cleared. Throughout their relationship, Katie had looked to him for support and love, but he was manipulative and controlling. He would gaslight her and pretend to help her, telling her she needed to go to therapy to deal with her anxiety. He would often toy with Katie's mental health and tell her that she was mentally unwell. The pair would text back and forth, and he would tell her she needed to go to rehab and that he would pay for it. Her anxiety was made worse when in 2021 her Ford Fiesta had been vandalized and her tires slashed, but it wasn't reported to the police. On February 18th, she had received a high court writ ordering that she pay £4,000 to Andrew Burfield, money that he said she owed him. The fees continued to escalate, and by April she owed £6,000. She was terrified that she would lose her home and that debt collectors would start taking her possessions from her. Burfield told her he would pay it and stop any bailiffs from bothering her. But as the deadline for payment grew closer, the money was yet to materialize. She had messaged her mother Dawn and told her she feared for her life. She said, "I'm paranoid to death he's gonna do something. Couldn't sleep all night." Andrew Burfield told her how much he loved her, but would then say she had overreacted about the money he said she owed, and he contacted debt collectors without telling her. In one message, he told her to take 2 weeks off work and go to a clinic for mental health treatment, adding, "I'm thinking we need to get you back on the right path, Babs." Despite Burfield's proclamations that he loved her, he was also secretly seeing another woman. She had told him how sick she was with anxiety and how paranoid and nervous she felt. He told her everything would be fine and sorted out on the April 22nd. Detective Chief Inspector Al Davies said, While we have arrested someone in connection with our investigation, I'm very much keeping an open mind as to what has happened, and I have a team of officers and staff working hard to try and find Katie and return her to her family. When investigators looked into Burfield's phone, they found several pieces of evidence. His iPhone had last been backed up to the iCloud on the April 4th as he had ran out of storage. In his Notes app, a series of drafted messages were found. The messages were him pretending to be Katie, and they were addressed to her children, mother, and him. They were almost word for word what had been sent on the April 22nd, but had not been drafted any later than 4th. When they looked at his movements the day before she had last been seen, another sinister discovery was made. He had gone out to the forest where his phone had been switched off for 90 minutes. He told the officers he had gone there to find a good spot as he wanted to take Katie for a picnic the next day. The officers discovered that day he had also borrowed a spade from his parents. Then another witness came forward. The homeowner of a property on Hillingdon Road that Burfield had worked at on Saturday 23rd said that Burfield had asked what day the bins would be emptied. This immediately stood out as strange. When the officers went to go and check, they found plastic bags with blood on them and Katie's bloodied flip-flops. The spade he had borrowed was also there. In an interview with police on the 25th, he said that their reason for going to the forest was because Katie would write down her problems and then burn the paper, so this was what they were going to do. He said he had gone to the forest on the 21st, but because it was late and dark, he couldn't find a good spot. As the days passed with still no sign of or word from Katie, hope began to fade. The police started to conduct their inquiry as a murder investigation. Lancashire police said, whilst Katie has not yet been found, we are now working on the basis that she is sadly no longer alive. The police conducted another interview with Andrew Burfield on the April 27th, and it was then that his story suddenly changed. He said that after going to what he called their place in the forest and set up their spot, there was an axe on top of the collar. He said that Katie had bet him he couldn't hit her can of drink with the axe. He said he had thrown the axe at a tree using both arms to throw it overhead, but at the same time Katie was starting to sit down. He stated that he threw it down instead of up and shouted at Katie, but it was too late, and she was struck once in the head with the back of the axe. He described being covered in blood as she lay in his arms, saying it was like something out of a film. He said he was unable to get her body into his van, so he decided to dig a 1.5-foot grave and bury her, covering her body with leaves and sticks, adding he didn't want her to be seen or for animals to find her. He tied a bag to a tree to mark the spot where she was buried. He hadn't planned it, he said, and he was going to go back to his house, deal with his children and her children, and then take his own life. He told the officers that he had burned her cards and phone before dumping the ashes in a bin outside a shop. The picnic box was found in his van, and investigators were also able to find a spot of blood inside Andrew Burfield's washing machine. Following this, he was charged with murder. On Friday, April 29th, DCI L. Davis told Katie's family the devastating news. Her sister Sarah said, "We simply could not face telling her children. DCI Davies had to do that for us. I cannot describe to anyone what that was like. It had been the longest 7 days of our lives." With this new information, a specialist search team was sent out to find her. They were able to find the bag tied to the tree, but they could not find any sign of a grave or burial site. As they couldn't find her body, police took the rare decision to have Burfield show them himself. He said he would take the officers to her, all of which was captured on a police body cam. He was dressed in a forensic suit and handcuffed as he escorted the officers to the deposition site. He led them 69 meters off of the main track and knelt down on the spot. It was just meters from where they had already been digging. It was here that the search for Katie Kenyon came to a devastating end. DCIL Davies said, "There was no mound of soil, no sign of a disturbance. It was a densely populated wooded area with a complex root network. Notwithstanding Burfield has a skill base as a builder, this was a complex grave. Each layer of soil was taken off in order. The topsoil, then the next, and put back in that same order. A large root ran through the grave and it had not been severed. An archaeologist and a forensic botanist said it was completely implausible to dig that grave within the timescale Burfield was known to have been in the forest with Katie. It was impeccably finished. Despite his story that she had only been hit once with the back of the axe, the post-mortem revealed that Katie had actually been hit 12 times. Her phone has also never been recovered. Katie's funeral service was held in May. Mourners followed the horse-drawn carriage carrying her coffin as her family and loved ones prepared to say goodbye. Her family said that she had been taken away from her children and family far too soon and that they felt stuck in a heartbreaking nightmare. Her sister Jenny said, "We will love you forever and always, my beautiful big sister." When his trial began at Preston Crown Court on November 14, 2022, it was expected to last roughly 3 weeks. He entered a plea of not guilty. The prosecution laid out their case saying, a post-mortem showed severe head injuries with multiple fractures. The injuries indicated the use of a heavy weapon such as an axe or a spade. Dr. Jamie Robinson, a home office pathologist, who will give evidence next week, estimated there were at least 12 separate strikes to the head. It is the prosecution's case that Andrew Burfield inflicted those blows. The court heard that on the April 21st, Katie was captured on CCTV kissing and hugging Andrew outside his home. That afternoon, Burfield traveled to his parents' home and took a spade, and that evening his van was seen traveling out towards the forest. He then sent a message to a woman he had been seeing saying that he was proper knackered. As the next day came around, in the morning the pair had messaged back and forth, and Katie had sent Andrew a message saying that she was ready and excited for a new chapter. He told Katie he was going to drive her to a unit for therapy where she could get some help. Phone data was able to show that Burfield had not taken his phone with him that day. At 9:07 a.m., Katie made her last phone call. Between 10:24 and 11:15 that morning, her phone didn't connect with the O2 network. The prosecution argued that it was during this time that Katie was murdered. At 12:34, Burfield sent a message to the other woman he had been seeing saying that something had come up involving the children and he wouldn't be able to make their date as planned. He then set about covering his tracks by messaging himself, her children and her mother pretending to be her. Sarah said, "When the messages were received that afternoon, we knew immediately that something was not right. Katie would never have left her children like that, and there was all sorts going through our heads. We went out looking for her almost straight away, and we sensed then that Burfield was behind it." On the third day of his trial, Andrew 2 years. Mr. Justice Goose told him, "Your murder of Katie was as cruel as it was savage. The calmness you displayed before, during, and after proves your dangerousness. You planned this as early as April 4th when you wrote notes on your phone to her children. You encouraged her to look forward to her new start, and she believed you." He said that what Andrew Burfield had done to Katie was a ferocious and cruel attack, adding that his guilty plea was not due to remorse but rather because his plan to cover his tracks had failed. Later that month, his sentence was referred to the Attorney General after a request to review it for being unduly lenient was made. His sentence was upheld, and it was determined it was not unduly lenient. DCI Davies called it one of the most complex investigations he had ever worked on. "This investigation is something that will remain with me forever. Katie was in the prime of her life, and she should still be here now. Her children should be waking up to their mom every morning. Andrew Burfield has completely taken all that away," he said. Katie Kenyon was a loving, devoted mother of 2. She had the rest of her life in front of her. Her loss has left a void that will never be filled. Her sister Sarah said, "Not only has Burfield taken Katie from us, he has taken our lives too. Her children have lost their mom in the most horrific way. She was mom, dad, and best friend all in one. Katie was a fantastic mom. Our mom Dawn has had to become a mother to 2 grieving teenagers. But to do this while grieving the loss of your daughter is so difficult. Katie told us she wanted to stop Burfield from being able to do to other women what he did to her. This cost her her life." Discover the chilling world of secret crime mysteries, where we delve into the most perplexing cold cases and unsolved crimes. Join us as we unravel hidden clues and explore haunting mysteries. Subscribe now and be part of the journey to bring these cases to light. Althia Oakley grew up in Arroyo Hondo near Taos, New Mexico. She graduated from Taos High School in 1984 and was crowned Taos Fiesta Princess in 1985. She later attended the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. On June 22, 1988, 21-year-old Althia visited her boyfriend at his fraternity house near campus. After an argument, Althia left the house alone. It is believed she went to a nearby duck pond to reflect after the disagreement. Though she had driven to the frat house, she apparently chose to leave her car there and walk back to the home she shared with her brother, Russell. At 8:42 p.m., at least 3 witnesses in the 1300 block of Buena Vista Southeast, 6 blocks from her home, heard a scream. One witness looked outside and saw Althia, who said, "I've been stabbed," before collapsing. Althia had multiple stab wounds to her torso. She was rushed to the University of New Mexico Hospital but died during surgery. Her funeral services were held at Our Lady of Sorrows Church in Arroyo Hondo. Police obtained a description of Althia's killer from one of the witnesses at the scene. The perpetrator was described as a Hispanic male, approximately 20 to 24 years old, standing 5 feet 7 to 5 feet 9 inches tall and weighing about 140 pounds. He had a medium build and short, dark brown hair. He had been wearing a white t-shirt, faded blue jeans, and white tennis shoes with a black stripe down the sides. A sketch of him was created and distributed, but Althia's killer remained unidentified. On August 16, 2021, Albuquerque police were finally able to visit Althia's parents and inform them that they believed they had their daughter's killer in custody. The man who got to deliver the news was Albuquerque Police Chief Harold Medina, a native of Taos who had connections to Althia and her family. When Althia was running for Taos Fiesta Queen, she needed the help of a seamstress to construct and fit her elaborate traditional outfit. The seamstress was Chief Medina's mother. He remembered how Althia would always be sure to smile and say hello to him when she was at his home to see his mother. "I always remembered her. Just the way she introduced herself to me and Mom was just like somebody who's confident and full of joy," Medina said in an interview with the Albuquerque Journal. "I mean, I saw this happen for my entire life. When Fiesta candidates come in, I saw different personalities over the years. Without a doubt, I can say hers was the most bubbly, positive personality. I think my mom would say that too." In addition, when he graduated from Taos High School in 1990, Harold Medina was the first recipient of the scholarship the Oakley family had established in Althia's name. As he advanced through the ranks once he entered law enforcement, he used the connections he made to keep tabs on Althia's case. Following his promotions in 2012 and 2018, he asked the investigators assigned to Althia's case if new technology had produced any new leads, but they never identified anything strong enough to move the case forward. 3 days after Chief Medina's meeting with the Oakleys, on August 19, 2021, 53-year-old Paul Raymond Apodaca was formally charged with Althia's murder. That day should have been Althia's 55th birthday. Apodaca made his first appearance in court the following day. When he was charged, Apodaca was already in police custody. He had an extensive criminal record and was in custody in the summer of 2021 for a probation violation. His most notorious crime was the 1995 rape of one of his young family members. Apodaca told a judge he had committed that crime because his younger brother Mark had just been convicted of murder, and he wanted to go to prison with him. Paul was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which he was not allowed to serve at the same institution where his brother was incarcerated. In March of 2021, Apodaca pleaded guilty to a charge of assault with a deadly weapon and was sentenced to 3 years of supervised probation. On July 16th, he told his probation officer that he would be staying at the Westside homeless shelter until he could get into an inpatient program or a halfway house, as he did not have anywhere to stay at the time. 3 days later, however, his probation officer received word that Apodaca had failed to report to the shelter, and his electronic monitoring device showed that he was instead sleeping behind a local Walgreens. He was arrested on July 20th for violating his probation. Following his arrest, Apodaca began confessing to crimes that had been committed years earlier. One of those crimes was the murder of a female student back in 1988. In 1988, Apodaca had been working as a security guard at the Technical Vocational Institute, which today is Central New Mexico Community College. The school is less than a mile away from where Althia was killed. One night in June, he saw a young woman walking alone and wanted to talk to her, but she walked away before he did. He then began following her in his vehicle for several blocks. He then decided he wanted to hold her at knife point and then rape her. He drove ahead of her, parked his vehicle, got out of it, and waited for her. When she reached him, she smiled at him and said hi as she walked past him. "That's the worst part. I heard someone that smiles at you," Apodaca said during his confession. Instead of abducting and assaulting her, Apodaca stabbed her several times. He ran away when a witness saw him. When asked why he had wanted to attack the woman, Apodaca told investigators, "When I thought about it, what made me do it, what made me attack her, was all the hatred I had for women. Because growing up, I seen men treating women bad, and they go for the bad guys. And I try to be nice and good, and they just don't want that." Authorities were skeptical of this unsolicited confession. A detective did ask Apodaca if there was any circumstance that inspired him to finally confess. In the eventual criminal complaint filed against Apodaca, that detective wrote, he said no. It was a shame that it took him so long to get to this point. Paul also said he realized what he had done was evil and dark. He said the word of God has helped him overcome the struggle. Apodaca did know some details of the crime that had not been released to the media and remembered the exact outfit Althia Oakley had been wearing when she was killed. A long denim skirt, a red and white striped shirt, and red flats. They were not going to risk the possibility that he had somehow heard these details from some other source, however, and they began investigating the crime again. They interviewed the witnesses from crime scene and looked into Apodaca's employment history. They were able to confirm that he had been hired at the Technical Vocational Institute in March of 1988 and was still working there in June, based on payroll records. They also had an unusual piece of physical evidence that did tie Apodaca to the scene. Apodaca claimed he had been wearing a distinctive watch his aunt had given him, with a moving moon and sun on it, on the day of the murder. He said he had taken it off while waiting for Althia to walk past him because he had assumed there would be a struggle when he attacked her. Such a watch had been found in a nearby storm drain near a trail of blood. Following their own investigation and the discovery of the information supporting Apodaca's confession, authorities charged him with Althia's murder. Apodaca has also confessed to other murders and rapes, but authorities have so far not released details on those crimes or any investigations that may be underway in them. Althia's parents have not spoken publicly since Apodaca was charged with their daughter's murder. According to Chief Medina, his meeting with them was emotional and bittersweet, but the news did seem to give them some sense of closure. Chief Medina is now focused on preparing the case against Apodaca and securing his conviction, the final step in getting justice for Althia. In 1985, 28-year-old Denise Stafford was living in Sarasota, Florida with her husband Frank. Frank worked as a bartender at an establishment called the Playground Lounge, and the couple had a 1-year-old daughter. It was Frank who discovered his wife's body in their home in the 300 block of Tarban Avenue just after 3 a.m. on October 13th when he returned home from work. The couple's daughter was found in her crib in another room, thankfully unharmed. Denise's time of death was estimated to be between 11 p.m. on October 12th and 3:10 a.m. on October 13th when her body was found. There were no signs of forced entry into the home. According to police, there was evidence that Denise had been attacked while she was standing up. However, Denise's body had been found on her bed. She was lying on her back with her head at the foot of the bed, leading police to believe that her killer had placed her on the bed after she was killed. Hundreds of pages of information were compiled in Denise's case file, but despite the best efforts of police, the case went cold. In November of 2020, Sarasota police made a new appeal to the public for information and announced that they hoped that new advancements in DNA technology could help in their investigation. The decades that had passed since Denise's murder did not diminish her family's desire for justice to be done in her case. According to Sarasota Police Department civilian investigator Jeff Birdwell, when Frank Stafford was asked what should happen to the person responsible for his wife's murder, his DNA that would ultimately lead to them identifying the person they believe committed the murder. When the clothes Denise was found wearing were re-examined, DNA was found on areas on the bottom portion of her pants, near the back of her ankles and behind her knees. Police believe the DNA was transferred there when her killer picked up Denise's body to place it on her bed. Further testing showed that the DNA belonged to Joseph Magaletti Jr. 64-year-old Magaletti had died while serving life in prison in 2015. He had been convicted of the 1995 murder of Kathleen Leonard, one of his former neighbors. She had been strangled, and her killer had emptied out her purse and apparently taken the cash from it. Magaletti was not charged with the murder until 1999 when he was tied to the crime through mitochondrial DNA found in a hair discovered when authorities examined the bindings and ligature used on Kathleen. He was also later tied to the scene through fingerprints when his fingerprints were found to be a match to prints found on the inside of Kathleen Leonard's apartment door just below its knob. Magaletti is also considered a suspect in the 1987 abduction and murder of 19-year-old Elizabeth Zia. At the time, he worked delivering water to the video store, where Elizabeth was employed. Magaletti worked as a bouncer at the playground lounge. This meant he knew Frank Stafford's work schedule, and therefore when Denise would be home alone with her daughter. He had also previously visited the Staffords at their home. Since she knew him, Denise may have willingly let him inside the house, explaining the lack of forced entry into the home. The detectives initially assigned to the case in 1985 had come across Magaletti as a person of interest, but they did not have enough evidence at the time to conclusively tie him to Denise's murder. In terms of motive, police believe Magaletti's drug habit may have played a role in the murder. He was known to steal items to resell and commit robberies in order to get cash to use to purchase cocaine. He may have believed that there was something of value in the Stafford home he could steal in order to sell for drug money. While Magaletti cannot be tried for Denise's murder or serve time for it, his identification and the fact that he is no longer alive is a comfort for Denise's mother, Dora Nipper. He's not going to harm anyone else. That has been my cry from the beginning. I didn't want to see any other mother go through what our family has, she said following the announcement of Magaletti's identification. Ms. Nipper also expressed her gratitude to all of the members of law enforcement who worked on her daughter's case. The investigators on Denise's case want its resolution to both give hope to families of victims and serve as a warning to perpetrators of cold cases. It's important for every suspect out there who hasn't been arrested to understand you haven't gotten away with it. Sarasota Police Department civilian investigator Jeff Birdwell, the lead detective on Denise's case, said after Magaletti's identification, "We're still coming. You still need to look over your shoulder. With some effort on our part and with technology, your day is coming." At approximately 3 a.m. on March 17, 1983, a Montgomery County Sheriff's Office deputy was on patrol in the 4000 block of Interstate 45 near League Line Road in Conroe, Texas when he came across a roadside fire. When he got out of his vehicle to investigate, he found that the fire was in fact the burning body of a nude woman. A cap from an oil container was found on the woman's body, possibly from the container of accelerant used to set her body on fire. A souvenir pen from a 76 truck stop was found not far away. Subsequent examination of her body would show that the woman had been raped, beaten, and strangled before her body was set on fire. None of these clues or this information helped authorities find the woman's identity, however. Before they found her name, authorities thought they found her killer when Henry Lee Lucas claimed responsibility for her death. Lucas notoriously claimed to have committed hundreds of murders. His increasingly outlandish stories, seemingly encouraged by the attention and special privileges they afforded him in prison. A Dallas Times Herald article would later refer to Lucas' uncorroborated, frequently debunked, and ultimately recanted confessions as the largest hoax in law enforcement annals. Hundreds of cases were closed based on his confessions, even in cases where evidence showed that Lucas was across the country from where the crime was committed at the time it occurred. Based solely on his confession, in 1986, Lucas was convicted of killing the initially unidentified woman found in Conroe, Texas. That same year, the FBI was finally able to identify the woman as Laura Marie Purchase based on her fingerprints. The last known sighting of Laura occurred in Houston, Texas on March 5, 1983, 12 days before her body was found. At the time she went missing, Laura was believed to have been living with a man named Howard or Howie who played in a local band called Malibu. They may have been living in a motel on the North Freeway. Howard or Howie never reported Laura missing, and police were never able to find him to interview him. Semen had been found on Laura's body. And in 2007, the Cold Case Squad at the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office submitted it for DNA testing. In 2008, the results of that testing showed that the DNA found on Laura's body did not belong to Henry Lee Lucas, nor did it belong to his frequent criminal cohort, Audie's tool. Laura's case is one of more than 20 in which DNA has excluded Lucas from a murder which he previously claimed to have committed. The contributor of the DNA would not be identified until 2021. In November of 2019, the DNA from Laura's body was submitted for genealogical testing, and an initial report was issued the following April. Further investigation helped authorities identify a potential suspect. On March 17, 2021, 38 years to the day after Laura's body was found, Montgomery County investigators arrived at the Kansas City, Kansas home of that suspect to collect a DNA sample directly from him. On April 30th, test results confirmed that his DNA was a match to that found on Laura Purchase's body. A warrant was then issued for his arrest. On May 11, 2021, 75-year-old Thomas Elvin Darnell was arrested at his home in Kansas City. He was subsequently extradited to Montgomery County on May 20th and charged with capital murder. Darnell never stood trial for Laura's murder, however, as he died in the Montgomery County Jail on July 26, 2021. A preliminary investigation determined that Darnell apparently died of natural causes related to his medical history, although his exact cause of death is still pending based on the results of his autopsy. According to a press release from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, Darnell suffered from numerous medical conditions and had been in declining health. He had been under hospice care at the time of his death. This case takes us to Anchorage, Alaska in the United States, back to the summer of 2019. Anchorage is a bustling city, home to nearly half of Alaska's population. With beautiful hiking trails, serene countrysides, abundant wildlife, and ski resorts, it offers the perfect setting for both quiet retreats and busy getaways. Among the nearly 300,000 residents of Anchorage was the large and tight-knit Hoffman family, who all lived together in an East Anchorage trailer. On June 2nd, Timothy Hoffman became concerned about his daughter, Cynthia. She hadn't responded to any messages or answered calls for several hours. Although 19 years old, Cynthia had developmental and learning challenges, working at a 7th grade level. Her sudden silence was unusual and alarming, and Timothy knew something was wrong. In the first weekend of June 2019, the Hoffman family had spent time working on a friend's camper van together. On June 2nd, Cynthia had planned to meet her sister to get her portion of money she had earned. She sent a text to her father saying she was on her way, but she never showed up to meet her sister that afternoon. Concerned, Timothy called the police, but they told him to wait 24 hours before calling back. Frustrated, Timothy expressed that they weren't taking the situation seriously and didn't fully understand how vulnerable Cynthia was. Despite her young age, Cynthia was known for being busy and determined. As tough as school had been for her, Cynthia had persevered and graduated in 2018. As well as working as an apprentice for Timothy, who worked in building and construction, she was earning extra money at a restaurant, studying in a post-high school skills program, and was close to getting her driver's permit as well. Timothy and Cynthia shared an incredibly close bond, and he said she was most definitely a daddy's girl. He recalled that she was always working hard to overcome her challenges and looking to make her family proud of her with everything that she did. All she wanted was my blessing and approval, and I gave that to her a lot, he said. Frustrated with the police department, Timothy started contacting news stations and set off on his motorbike, going through the nearby woods and bike paths, searching everywhere. When she didn't come home the first day, I knew something was wrong, and then all I could think about was the knock on the door, he said. He had many people reaching out to see if they could help, and he gladly accepted them all. But one set of messages in particular left him more confused than grateful. He had received several messages from one of Cynthia's closest friends, Angela. Angela said that Cynthia had asked her to drop her off at Polar Bear Park, something that she had agreed to do, but she hadn't seen her since then. She said she had last seen her at 4 p.m. on June 2nd, wearing blue jeans, a hoodie, and tennis shoes. Timothy knew this was strange, as Cynthia didn't mention this to him or her sister that she was going to meet. In Angela's messages, she said, "Is she okay? I hope she comes home safely. She's my best friend. I'm starting to get worried. I don't trust what she said about that guy. I love her too. I want the best for her and want her to come back. She won't answer me. I think she's ignoring everyone. I know she will come home safe." Timothy had no idea what guy Angela was talking about, and even though he pushed for clarification, he was none the wiser. The police were now looking into Cynthia's disappearance, and Timothy passed these messages on to them in the hope it might help them find some answers. Little did he know, the number was not linked to an Angela. It was linked to an 18-year-old named Denali Bremer. Denali and Cynthia were actually close friends and had met through school. They often posed in selfies together on social media with the captions reading BFF. So why she had given a different name was confusing. Just one day later, on the evening of June 3rd, the Anchorage Police Department were contacted by a woman named Nicole. Nicole said that on the evening of June 2nd, the date Cynthia was last seen, Nicole's daughter and someone Nicole knew as Anthony were both at her house. Shockingly, Anthony had told her that Cynthia was dead and that he was responsible, and her daughter was none other than Denali Bremer, who also apparently went by Angela. After this, the pair left the house and she hadn't seen them since. Given what Anthony had said, she was now concerned for her daughter's safety as well. Police located the pair and started digging into these claims. The June 4th, early evening, the knock Timothy had been painfully anticipating came at the door. The minute he saw the officers, he said, "She's dead, isn't she?" Detectives confirmed that they had just found his daughter's body. Cynthia had been discovered along the Eklutna riverbank. She was bound with duct tape, and she had been shot in the back of the head before being pushed into the river. Officers believed that she had been killed before Timothy had even reported her as missing, and it is unconfirmed whether or not the shot killed her instantly or if she was still alive when she was put into the water. It was impossible for the Hoffmans to contemplate who on earth would want to do this to Cynthia. She never spoke of having any problems with anyone. She had lots of friends and was so loved by those around her. Before long, a web of lies would start to unravel, showing the twisted and disturbing reality of what had happened and why. And given what Denali's mother Nicole had told the police, officers were only looking at Denali and Anthony for answers. Anthony was actually a 16-year-old called Caden McIntosh, a teen living on the streets at the time. On June 5th, Caden McIntosh was arrested, and 2 days later, so was Denali Bremer. The pair were initially quiet, and Denali was even granted bail. But after her phone was looked at, she was pulled back in, and the pair would soon start to talk. It quickly became apparent that Denali had attempted to delete threads of messages, which fortunately could be easily recovered. She had been texting someone called Tyler, a man she had started an online relationship with, and the conversations between the pair were extremely dark. Tyler told her he was very wealthy and lived in Kansas, almost 4,000 miles away. The police found child pornography on Denali's phone as well, and a string of explicit images of children that Denali had sent to Tyler for his approval. The more the pair spoke, the more disturbing things became. Tyler soon told Denali to sexually assault an 8-year-old and send him videos of it. After this, he wanted her to assault a 14-year-old as well. The text threads between the pair were graphic. One message from Tyler read, "So are you going to the 14-year-old? Gonna go by weed first," Denali replied. "I want to get her high for it so she doesn't fight me. I love you. Soon we can rape together." After these assaults, Tyler texted Denali and told her he wanted to see more. He wanted her to rape and murder someone. In exchange, he said that he would pay her $9 million. Denali then set about recruiting people to help her and get the plan in motion. She finally told police that she and Caden had picked Cynthia up and drove out about 20 miles away from her home using a car owned by another teenager that she had promised $500,000 of the alleged money to, a 19-year-old called Caleb Leland. This gave police a fourth name to look at, but little did they know, this would soon become more. Denali said that she, Caden, and Cynthia all drove around smoking marijuana together, something Timothy said he didn't see his daughter doing at all and was likely pressured into doing in the first place, if it was even true. After this, they drove out to a parking lot near the Thunderbird Falls Trail with the intention of going on a hike, But instead of following the trail, they abandoned it and followed another path that ran alongside the Eklutna River. They all walked along until they found an isolated clearing. Denali claimed that the three of them agreed to duct tape each other and take photographs as part of a joke or prank. In the clearing, Cynthia was bound by her ankles and wrists and had tape put over her mouth. Cynthia soon realized this was not a joke and started to panic. She started shouting that she was going to call the police. Denali held a gun to her head, which she eventually let Caden take off her. Caden then shot Cynthia in the back of the head. In Caden's interview, he admitted to duct taping Cynthia and said that he had blacked out, but remembered shooting her and pushing her into the river. As much as Denali was trying to distance herself, she had been documenting the whole ordeal on her phone, sending photographs and videos to Tyler via Snapchat, showing that she was someone who was very much involved. Although Tyler said he wanted to see a rape as well as a murder, there was no evidence to suggest that Cynthia had been sexually assaulted. To the police, Denali spoke of being afraid of Caden, implying she was following his suit, as well as being tricked by Tyler. However, Denali had not only brought and held the loaded gun, she photographed and filmed the entire thing, and had engaged in numerous conversations with Tyler about all kinds of horrifying things up until that point. Police felt confident that Tyler and Denali were ringleaders together. After Cynthia had been pushed into the river, Denali and Caden then went back to the car and made a pact to contact Cynthia's family to say that she had been dropped off at the park. After this, they set about burning and disposing of Cynthia's purse, clothes, and ID in Lions Park in northeast Anchorage. They even attempted to burn the gun. Denali later texted Tyler and said, "I wish I never made a deal with you in the first place. We can meet, but once I see a cop, I'm telling him or her that I made you rape people and kill CC." But as the police already suspected, Tyler wasn't who he claimed he was either. The man behind the screen was actually 21-year-old Darren Schillmiller. He wasn't a millionaire and he wasn't living in Kansas. He lived in New Salisbury, Indiana. When he was tracked down and questioned, he confessed to everything, including convincing Denali that he was a millionaire and that he would pay her to assault and kill Cynthia. He also admitted that he and Denali had discussed murdering someone else after Cynthia was dead. Those that knew Darren Schillmiller or Tyler said his dark thoughts had always been obvious. When he was a teenager, he had started asking very young girls to send him explicit photographs, often making up fake profiles and going by fake names online as well. People described him as off and creepy. As he got older, he started asking people to send him photos of their children, sometimes while they were being changed or bathed. He also had a fetish for dirty diapers and often wanted to see photographs of those too. He had previously been the subject of a child pornography investigation, but no charges were filed and the case collapsed. When he told Denali he wanted her to find someone to kill, she made the choice quickly. She chose Cynthia because she was her closest friend. She thought it would be easier to use the trust that Cynthia had for her to lure her away without her questioning it. Timothy said, "Her disability just made her want to have friends. That's all she wanted, was just to be her friend." Detectives subpoenaed Verizon for Darren's phone data, and all the footage of the minors Denali had heard up until that point were found, along with more evidence that highlighted Darren's sick perversions. They also uncovered a Snapchat video that Denali had uploaded after Cynthia had been killed, in which she said, "I just want to thank everyone that's been there for me my whole life and these past few years and everything. I fucked up. I know I did. If I could take back what I've done, I can't. I'm sorry everybody, my family, my friends. I guess you will hear from me when you hear from me, but I won't be back for a long time. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it." In the background of the video, Caden could be seen pacing around as well. A grand jury would soon indict 6 individuals in Cynthia Hoffman's case. Darren Schillmiller, Denali Bremer, Caden McIntosh, Caleb Leland, who had given them the car, and 2 other teens who have not been named due to their ages. They were all indicted on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and murder in the second degree. 16-year-old Caden was charged as an adult, and as well as murder, he also faced 4 counts of tampering with evidence. The 2 juveniles, a male and a female, admitted to knowing about and being present for the planning of the murder in exchange for a cut of the money. Caleb was also accused of sexually assaulting the female juvenile suspect and faces additional charges of sexual assault and sexual abuse of a minor, as well as murder charges. Darren and Annalie were indicted on more counts of solicitation to commit murder in the first degree, and then faced further charges of production of child pornography, conspiracy to produce child pornography, distribution of child pornography, and the coercion and enticement of a minor. All 6 individuals entered pleas of not guilty. Denali addressed the court and even spoke of having a child herself, something which had not been mentioned before this point. She said, "And I don't want my daughter knowing that her mom grew up a killer because I don't see myself as one." Denali's sister spoke to the media and said they were devastated that she could be involved in something like this. Denali is the 3rd child of 5 girls. Her older sisters Rebecca and Brenna said that all of the children had been removed from the care of their mother at different points, and the abuse reached a tipping point when the man living with their mother at the time killed their 2-month-old baby sister, Gabrielle. Denali was adopted in her early childhood, but both her sisters said the trauma may have lingered and potentially might have been the cause of several issues in adulthood. "We all had really hard lives, and I feel like she took the wrong road with the wrong people who didn't care about her. And now she's paying the ultimate cost," said Brenner. The pending hearing and trials have all been delayed and postponed several times for various reasons. 56 gigabytes of material and over 100,000 pages of evidence and cell phone data was handed over in court, which is a huge amount to dissect and go through. This, coupled with lockdowns due to the pandemic, has pushed the trial dates back, and in January 2020 it was announced it would be some time before the dates were set. Timothy Hoffman said he would be in court at every opportunity, adding, "Nothing really disappoints me. I am prepared for a long journey. It was a shocking and sick case in every imaginable way. Murder, sexual assault, catfishing, manipulation, greed, and the ultimate betrayal in the most devastating way." Cynthia Hoffman was a determined young woman, someone who had faced challenges and adversity and had pushed through all of it, determined to always give her all and make her family proud. Her life came to an end in a terrifying way at the hands of someone she trusted and would never have doubted. 16-year-old Shelley-Anne Baishu lived with her parents, Muriel and Sandy, and her older brother Tim in Hinton, Alberta. Although Shelley-Anne was petite, standing barely 5 feet tall and weighing less than 100 pounds, her small size didn't match her lively personality. She had a deep love for children and dreamed of becoming a teacher one day. Christmas was her favorite time of year, and she had a special gift for brightening anyone's day, no matter how tough things were for them. Shelley-Anne was always eager to help others and believed in treating everyone equally, regardless of their financial or social status. Shelley-Anne assumed that everyone shared her compassionate nature, and her mother, Muriel, worried that this trust may have played a role in her sudden disappearance on May 3, 1983. That evening, Shelley-Anne had been at her boyfriend's home in what is now known as the Hillcrest Trailer Park, which was then called the Sunset Trailer Court. Around 8 p.m., she called her mother to let her know that a friend would be giving her a ride home and that she would be there soon. Before ending the call, Shelley-Anne asked her mother to make her a specific Hungarian noodle dish, one of her favorite foods. Then, at 9 p.m., Muriel received another phone call, this time from Shelley-Anne's boyfriend, who asked to speak with Shelley, and Muriel told him to stop joking around since Shelley-Anne had not yet returned from his home, before realizing that the fact that he was calling assuming her daughter had already returned home meant that Shelley-Anne had left and that something had gone seriously wrong during her travels. Shelley-Anne's boyfriend did not have any way of driving her home, so a friend was supposed to come over to give her a ride, like Shelley-Anne had said during her earlier phone call. However, that friend was unable to give her the ride as planned, so Shelley-Anne had decided to walk the 4 miles between the trailer park on Highway 16 and her home off of Highway 40. Sandy and Tim got in their car to go out looking for Shelley-Anne, and Muriel set out on foot to search for her daughter. It was dark, and her efforts were hampered by unusually strong winds that whipped through the area that night. Fighting through the wind, Muriel walked along the highway, calling Shelley-Anne's name, hoping her voice would carry over the howling winds. The authorities were called, and an investigation began. A witness came forward reporting a sighting of Shelley-Anne. They had seen her walking west on the north side of Highway 16 going towards her house. The witness said Shelley-Anne did not appear to be trying to hitchhike. Authorities, along with Shelley-Anne's friends, family, and neighbors, spent weeks searching for her. The area off of the highway was dense woodland, making the search difficult. A few days into the search, several items that belonged to Shelley and were discovered off of the highway near the Athabasca River, approximately 3 miles away from her home. These items included the jacket she had last been seen wearing, a bra, pantyhose, Shelley-Anne's library card, and a library book she had taken out on the day she disappeared. Shelley-Anne herself, however, remained missing. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police interviewed several persons of interest, but no arrests were made in the case. Authorities remained in contact with Shelley-Anne's family for the first decade following her disappearance, but according to her mother, Muriel, while the family continued their own efforts to find Shelley-Anne, they did not hear from the RCMP for a period of approximately 15 years, once the 10-year anniversary of Shelley-Anne going missing passed. In 2010, Shelley-Anne's case was reevaluated by authorities to see if it could be connected to the Highway of Tears series of disappearances and murders in neighboring British Columbia. Ultimately, they decided Shelley-Anne's case was unrelated. The RCMP made another public appeal about the case in 2013 on the 30th anniversary of Shelley-Anne's disappearance. That same year, Shelley-Anne's older brother, Tim, passed away from cancer. Shelley-Anne's case is currently assigned to the Historical Homicide Unit of the RCMP. They have re-interviewed witnesses, investigated new tips, and re-examined evidence using modern forensic techniques. This testing did locate DNA evidence yet been able to identify the contributor of the DNA. We never close cases, no matter how old, Sergeant Jason Zaslak of the Historical Homicide Unit said in 2020. This case is one that really touches the heart. We haven't given up. Given the passage of time and the lack of any sign of Shelley-Anne living elsewhere, both the RCMP and Shelley-Anne's family believe that she most likely is no longer alive. While the RCMP remains focused on the criminal investigation, Shelley-Anne's family just wants to find her. "I'm not looking for justice. I don't think I'll get it," Shelley-Anne's mother, Muriel, said in 2020. "I just want to find my daughter's remains so I can lay her to rest and give her peace. And for us, there is no such thing as closure, but there is peace. All we want is peace." Stephen Newing was born on April 15, 1958, in the seaside town of Blackpool. He was the oldest of 4 children. Remembering her son in 2013, his mother Jean said, "I think of his cheeky little freckled face and the way he always used to get up to mischief, whether it was falling off his bike, falling out of a tree, or having his teeth knocked out by a football." In 1969, the family was living on Lee Warner Avenue in Fakenham, Norfolk. That September 2nd was during Stephen's school holidays, so the 11-year-old had been playing with a friend. He told his mother he would be having dinner at his friend's house, and Jean told him to be home by 8 p.m. before he left. When 9 p.m. came that evening and Stephen had not yet returned home, Jean called the police. Stephen was seen by his brother and a friend as he left home around 3 p.m., and another friend believed they saw him walking alone along a road later that evening. He had left his bicycle at home that day and had no money with him. Police conducted door-to-door searches and numerous interviews. Stephen's satchel was found near a water tower not far from his home. Reports of sightings of Stephen came in from Norfolk and Suffolk, and a potential sighting of him police described as significant came in from Sutton Bridge in Lincolnshire. There were fears that Stephen may have fallen down a well, but authorities say that possibility has been thoroughly investigated. The Newing family home was searched twice, and authorities are confident that Stephen's family did not play a role in his disappearance. Investigators have considered the possibility that Stephen was abducted, even interviewing a man working at a circus that was in the area at the time of Stephen's disappearance. They were concerned may have been involved, but so far they do not have any evidence supporting this or any theory. Stephen's devastated family found various ways to both live with Stephen's loss and honor his life in the years following his disappearance. While they could not have a funeral in the traditional sense as they did not have Stephen's body, they held a memorial service for Stephen at Fakenham Parish Church in 2002, during which a memorial was dedicated to Stephen in hopes that coming together to honor Stephen's life would assist them in their ongoing attempts to cope with his disappearance. Stephen's mother, Jean, worked with the Benjamin Foundation to open the Stephen Newing House in partnership with Flagship Housing and the North Norfolk District Council. The house provides housing and support to vulnerable 16 to 25-year-olds in order to combat youth homelessness. According to staff, Mrs. Newing seemed to take comfort in visiting the residents of the house, and she bought them Christmas presents every year. While Mrs. Newing found ways to honor Stephen's life, she never gave up on her goal of finding her son. I still very much want to know what happened to him. At my age, I don't know that I'll ever know the truth, but I feel it's important for me to find out, Mrs. Newing said in 2013. She passed away on September 1, 2014, the day before the 45th anniversary of Stephen's disappearance. In 2019, investigators highlighted a little-known detail of the case in hopes that it would jog the memory of witnesses who may have seen Stephen the day he disappeared. The day before he vanished, Stephen had found a white mouse in his neighbor's garden and had been showing it to his friends on the day he went missing. People may not remember seeing an 11-year-old 50 years ago, but they might remember an 11-year-old boy with a white mouse, Norfolk and Suffolk cold case manager Andy Guy pointed out. While the detail is small, Mr. Guy felt he needed to release it. While it was possible that potential witnesses were still alive and able to remember 1969, 50 years on is probably the last time we can appeal to people, he said. It's the last roll of the dice from the perspective of people's memories. The more than 50 years that have passed since Stephen went missing have not erased the love his brother and two sisters have for him or their hope to find their brother. I was the last person to see him, and there is not a day that goes by that I do not think of him and try to work out what happened, Stephen's brother Terry said in 2019. The effects of this have been profound on all our family. Our parents have since died without knowing what happened, and Stephen has an extended family who never met him, only knowing of him from newspaper cuttings and hearsay. However, I still believe that even with the passage of time, the answers we need are still there and would urge anyone with any knowledge of his disappearance, no matter how or insignificant, to please contact the police so that we can do something our parents were unable to do. Lay him to rest and get the closure we need. In 2020, Melinda Lynxleg was a 40-year-old mother of 6 children ranging in age from 4 to 22. She was from Tutankamunziang First Nation in western Manitoba, where the last sighting of her occurred on March 31, 2020. She was seen walking along a gravel road on the outskirts of the community. Melinda had been visiting friends outside of the community. At the time, the community had a blockade set up due to COVID-19, and residents had to check in and out with security as they came and went. Melinda was last seen walking in the direction of the blockade, but she never reached it as she was never logged in there. A purse confirmed to be Melinda's by her oldest daughter would later be found on the ground near where she was last seen. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police Detachment in Roblin was notified of Melinda's disappearance on April 16th after her loved ones could not contact her. There has not been any activity on Melinda's bank accounts or social media or contact with any of her family members. By November of 2020, the RCMP had spoken with more than 50 people and followed up on numerous tips in connection to their investigation into Melinda's case. Potential sightings of Melinda throughout Manitoba have been reported since she vanished. However, subsequent review of surveillance footage has found that the woman witnesses believed to be Melinda was not in fact her. While the RCMP has been investigating the case, the physical searching for Melinda has largely been carried out by her large extended family. Their efforts have been limited by their lack of access to resources like equipment and trained personnel and, eventually, for several months, by severe winter weather. Melinda's family is heartbroken over her disappearance, especially her children. It's painful, Melinda's aunt, Betty Lynxleg, told CBC News in January of 2021. For the whole family and the siblings, I guess when you lose somebody like that and you just don't know what happened, it's not only shocking, but it's just a daily hurt. Melinda's younger children are in the care of their grandparents. Melinda's family is offering a $5,000 reward for information in the case. In 2020, 45-year-old Fauna Fry was temporarily sharing a home with her father John and older brother Dallas. The three of them worked together in the family business, building and selling homes. The family was close not only because they spent so much time working together, but also because they had survived a great deal of tragedy. Fanta's mother and sister had died within 2 years of each other, with her sister passing away in 2006. Fauna would lose her one remaining sibling in 2020. On June 19th, Dallas Fry unexpectedly died of a heart attack at the age of 47. It was Fauna who found his body after he failed to show up to a home where the family had been working, refinishing its hardwood floors. The death of her brother was a devastating loss for Fauna. On June 27th, she left home in her blue 1000 Jeep Grand Cherokee to drive to Grants Pass, Oregon to give some of Dallas' possessions to a longtime friend of his. That friend did confirm that Fauna reached his home and had delivered the items. On June 28th, Fauna called her father from the Super 8 motel in Grants Pass. She had rented a room for a night there and called from the room's landline. Fauna had left her cell phone, which she typically did not like to use, and her laptop at home when she left on her trip. According to John, Fauna sounded highly distressed, still struggling with the grief caused by the death of her brother. She told him that she had given a ride to a hitchhiker, which was unusual for her. John told Fauna that she should consider looking for a cabin to rent nearby because she would be more comfortable there than she would be in a motel. Fauna did then make a reservation at the nearby We Ask You Inn for the following night and told her father that she would call him the next day after she checked in there. She never did. Fauna had told her father over the phone that she was going to take a shower and then run out to the store. According to the friend of her brother's, she had gone to see. There had not been any bags or suitcases in Fauna's car when he happened to glance inside of it while she was at his home. Credit card records show that she made purchases at 2 stores in Grants Pass that night. At Big 5 Sporting Goods, Fauna purchased 3 flashlights, a lantern, a sports bra, capris, and a pair of tennis shoes. She then went to a Fred Meyer grocery store where she bought shampoo, conditioner, 2 Burt's Bees products, socks, more pieces of activewear clothing, potato chips, a sandwich, and 2 cans of beer. Security footage at the Fred Meyer shows her leaving the store wearing a neon green and purple pullover. Security footage at the Super 8 confirmed that Fauna made it back to her room after she left the store and shows her leaving the motel the following morning, June 29th, with her belongings. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Fauna. She never checked in for her reservation at the We Ask You Inn. Her credit card was still charged for the stay as she never called to cancel a reservation. There has been no further activity on her credit card or bank account. When Fauna did not return home or make any further phone calls to him, her father reported her missing. John has been desperate to find his one surviving child and dedicated himself to the search for her even while he is still in mourning the recent loss of his son. He began driving all over the state searching for Fauna and following up on any lead he can get, sleeping in the back of his truck during his travels. "I've searched half the state of Oregon," he told Dateline in early September, more than 2 months after Fauna went missing. "We're at a standstill and don't know where to go from here. We just want her home safe." John has also hired a private investigator to work on the case. There have been several potential sightings of Fauna reported since her disappearance, but none of them have been confirmed or helped bring Fauna home. Other women close in age and appearance to Fauna went missing in the area around the time of her disappearance, which Fauna's father believes may be part of a pattern. These other disappearances also make it difficult to determine which missing woman may have been observed by individuals calling in potential sightings. The hitchhiker Fauna picked up prior to going missing was found and interviewed but could not provide any information about Fauna's whereabouts. Fauna had previously lived in southern Oregon for many years and was familiar with the area. She regularly hiked and was accustomed to the outdoors. On September 23rd, police found Fauna's Jeep north of Galize, Oregon on Rubin Mountain Road a few miles past the Grave Creek boat landing. The vehicle was locked and authorities believe it had been left where it was found for at least a month. Cadaver dogs were brought in to search the area but did not find anything. The Oregon State Police processed the vehicle for evidence and found some of Fauna's belongings. They found fingerprints which were not yet processed as of February of 2021. As there is not yet definitive evidence of a crime being committed, the fingerprints have not been prioritized over other evidence needing to be processed at the lab. On the first anniversary of Fauna's disappearance, a rally was held outside of the Josephine County Courthouse to bring attention both to Fauna's case and to other similar cases in the area. Fauna's family was supported at the rally by others concerned by the large number of women who have gone missing in southern Oregon in recent years. including activists from the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement and the families of other missing women, including relatives of 43-year-old Lisa Cronin, who disappeared from Sunny Valley, Oregon in December of 2019. There is currently a $100,000 reward being offered in Fauna's case. Fauna remains missing, and her father remains committed to finding her. 6-year-old Aji Desir lived in Immokalee, Florida, and was a student at Village Oaks Elementary School. He lived with his mother, Marie Nieta, and his stepfather, Antal Allant. Marie came to the United States from Haiti in 2001. She returned to Haiti for a 3-month visit, during which time she conceived Aji, who was born after she came back to Florida. Aji's biological father, Yves Desir, remained in Haiti, and Antal considered Aji to be like his own son. Aji loved spending time at his grandmother's house in the Immokalee farm workers village and playing with children from the neighborhood. He spent a lot of time there, especially when his parents were at work. His mother worked in nursing at an assisted living facility in North Naples, and his stepfather worked at a local pizza parlor. Aji was at his grandmother's house on Saturday, January 10, 2009. He spent most of the day coming in and out of the house and ate lunch with his grandmother. When he was outside, his grandmother kept an eye on him through the window as he played. Aji's stepfather came to pick him up around 5 p.m., but could not find Aji amongst the group of neighborhood children playing outside. He asked the other children where Aji was, but none of them knew where he had gone. Aji's grandmother had last seen him from inside the house approximately 15 minutes earlier. Neighbors helped look for Aji in the neighborhood and in nearby woods, but could not find him, so the authorities were called. The search effort for Aji and the investigation into his disappearance was headed by the Collier County Sheriff's Office. K-9 units were brought in and searchers combed the area on foot, on horseback, and on all-terrain vehicles. In addition to the Collier County Sheriff's Office, law enforcement agencies from neighboring counties, as well as the state of Florida and the federal government, also joined in the search rogie. These agencies included the Lee County Sheriff's Office, the Hendry County Sheriff's Office, the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Hendry Correctional Institution, which provided bloodhounds to the search effort. Aji's neighbors helped look for him as soon as his disappearance was noticed, and volunteers from the larger community quickly volunteered to join in the effort. Within just the first 6 days of the search for Aji, authorities estimated that between law enforcement professionals and volunteers, nearly 1,000 people helped look for him. Despite this massive effort, no sign of Aji was found. Aji's parents described him as a good boy who knew to stay close to his grandmother's house when he was outside. He had never run away or wandered off in the past. Aji was developmentally delayed, and while he was 6 years old, he was estimated to have the mental capacity of a 2-year-old. Aji was largely nonverbal, mainly communicating understood Haitian Creole, and his English vocabulary was more limited. Because of his special needs, there were also concerns that Aji may be alarmed by the noise created by the search parties and hide from them out of fear. His parents believed that he would be able to comprehend that he was lost and needed help, but would most likely be too afraid to approach a stranger to try to get assistance. Over 100 tips were called in within the first week following Aji's disappearance, and authorities cleared more than 80 of them within that same time period. They believed Aji most likely either wandered off or was abducted, but they have no strong evidence supporting either scenario. According to the other children who had been outside at the time, they did not see any suspicious vehicles or individuals. Aji's case received national attention and was featured on America's Most Wanted 3 times in 2009, and he was one of 6 missing children featured on the cover of People magazine that November. Thanks to a partnership between the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the United States Postal Service, and Velasys, one of the nation's largest marketing companies. Aji's picture and information were included with national direct mailing advertising flyers distributed in November-December of 2009. The flyers reached 75 million homes across the United States. For months after Aji's disappearance, his mother gave birth to a daughter named Ajiani in honor of her missing brother. Aji's family has said they will never give up on finding him. "We still have never forgotten, never in my life, his mother said in 2019. Even a decade after he went missing, they still had not been able to give up hope on the possibility of finding him alive. And their hopes were raised when another missing child, Jamie Kloss, was found alive in Wisconsin. I think he's still alive because I don't want to think something can happen, Antal Allant said in 2019. I want to think he's still there. The Hopp family spent all of November 1st, 1955, harvesting sugar beets on their farm in Weld County, Colorado, located east of Longmont and southwest of Platteville. Just after 7 p.m., while they were having dinner inside their farmhouse, they heard a powerful explosion that shook every window in the home. When they looked outside, they heard the roar of engines and saw a ball of fire streaking through the sky. It appeared to be heading straight for them, and they initially feared it would hit their house, but its path shifted slightly before impact. 18-year-old Conrad Hopp ran outside with one of his brothers, but they lost sight of the flames as they fell behind some of the outbuildings on their farm. They jumped into Conrad's car, while their father and another brother took a farm truck. The two vehicles sped through the fields toward the outbuildings, dodging flaming debris as they went. When they reached an irrigation ditch, Conrad had to park the car, and he and his brother continued on foot. The brothers quickly realized that the engine noises and falling debris meant the ball of flames had been an airplane. They were not surprised when they saw the back of an airplane seat illuminated by the car's headlights when they stepped out. Conrad's brother climbed over a fence and ran toward the debris, calling back to Conrad to go get their coats from the house. As Conrad turned to return to the car, he saw the front of the airplane seat he had just glimpsed a moment earlier. He also saw that a person had been seated in it, their body still strapped in by the seatbelt. Within moments of the initial explosion, hundreds of calls came in to the Longmont Police Department. People who were close enough to have seen where the wreckage had gone down raced to the scene to try to help. The chief of police in Longmont, Keith Cunningham, dispatched every police officer and firefighter in town to the scene and called in the Colorado State Patrol. He had initially also ordered every ambulance in Longmont to drive out to the crash site. However, when the first police officers arrived on the scene, they radioed in that no ambulances would be necessary. No one had survived the crash. The downed plane was United Airlines 629, which had taken off at 6:52 p.m. from Stapleton Airport in Denver, en route to Portland, Oregon. 11 minutes after the DC-6B took off, the air traffic controllers in the tower at the airport noticed two bright white lights in the sky to northwest of the airport. The two lights fell towards the ground together, and the controllers then observed a flash as the two lights appeared to reach the ground. The controllers immediately began radioing all known air traffic in the area. United 629 was the only plane that did not respond. All 44 people on board the plane, 39 passengers and 5 crew members, were killed. The victims ranged in age from 13 months to 81 years. 13-month-old James Fitzpatrick II had been traveling with his mother Helen on their way to Japan to meet his father, who was serving in the military and had been obligated to leave for duty the day after his son's birth. 81-year-old Layla McLean lived in Portland and had been returning home after visiting her stepson in Connecticut. Alma Windsor had been traveling to Tacoma, Washington to help care for her son-in-law, who was suffering from polio. James and Sarah Dory were on their very first flight, traveling to Portland to see their son. Airman Second Class, Jesse Sizemore was returning to his Air Force Base in Alaska after visiting his family in Alabama while on leave. 5 children lost both of their parents in the tragedy. A temporary morgue was set up at the National Guard Armory in Greeley, Colorado, north of the crash site, and bodies were taken there as they were located. 21 of the people who had been on the plane had their fingerprints on file, either because of their employment, naturalization, or military service, and the remaining individuals were identified by their friends or relatives, or by their personal effects. The Civil Aeronautics Board, along with personnel from United Airlines, investigated the crash with the full support of the FBI, who sent an expert from the FBI laboratory to the site the day after the crash at the board's request. 100 of people from the area showed up to the scene, many staring in stunned silence. Others helped with the investigation, locating bodies and helping with their recovery. Unfortunately, Along with the well-meaning individuals who came to see what they could do to be of service came the looters who were seen stealing watches and other valuables off of the bodies of the victims. In response to this, the Weld County Sheriff's Office contacted the Colorado State College of Education in Greeley to recruit some of their students. Members of the Delta Psi fraternity came to stand guard around the field that contained the majority of the evidence from the crash, wearing their matching fraternity jackets so that they were identifiable to law enforcement. The full primary debris field of the crash covered 6 square miles. The tail portion of the plane had been found on a farm a mile and a half away from the main crash site, cleanly cut from the rest of the plane. The size of the debris field was an important clue for investigators. When a plane crashes while still in one piece, it results in a relatively small debris field. The fact that the debris field from Flight 629 was so large and the multiple pieces of its fuselage were spread over such a wide area indicated that it had somehow come apart while it was still in the air. For some of the local residents who were present where the tail of the plane had come down and were familiar with explosives because of their agricultural applications, the cause of the crash was clear, thanks to the distinctive firecracker-like smell left behind by exploded dynamite. The area surrounding the crash site was mapped out, and an extensive and detailed grid search was carried out looking for pieces of the plane or items that had been onboarded. Each item that was found had its location on the grid recorded before it was collected. The initial search area had to be expanded by several miles after hunters and other local residents reported finding parts of the plane and pieces of mail it had been carrying outside of the original parameters. The wreckage was taken to a warehouse at Stapleton Airport where a wood and wire mock-up of the fuselage of the plane had been constructed so that the pieces collected from the crash site could be affixed to it, allowing investigators to reconstruct the plane and to study where and how severely the fuselage had been damaged. The investigation quickly began supporting the notion that United 629 had not been brought down accidentally. No fatigue cracking or structural failings could be found, and records showed that the plane had received proper maintenance and that any concerns raised by pilots about the plane's operation had been addressed. Furthermore, the reconstruction of the fuselage showed that the recovered pieces from the plane grew progressively smaller as they reached a point in the number 4 cargo hold. The fragments closest to that spot were minuscule, and much of the area surrounding it was entirely missing, indicating that some sort of explosion had originated from that location. The scent of explosives lingered on pieces of the fuselage from the number 4 cargo hold, as well as on pieces of cargo known to have been conveyed in it. These pieces and items also had smudges on them that looked like soot. Chemical analysis of the soot-like deposits by the FBI laboratory revealed the presence of chemicals that will be left behind following the explosion of dynamite. Some of the examined items also had residue containing manganese dioxide, commonly found in dry cell batteries. 11 small pieces of material believed to have come from a 6-volt Eveready hotshot battery were found amongst the wreckage. Dynamite and batteries can be used in the construction of a bomb. As best as the Civil Aeronautics Board could determine from the various aspects of their investigation, the plane had been brought down by an explosion while it was functioning normally. They accepted the testimony of the controllers in the tower and placed the time of the explosion at 7:03 p.m. They believed that the second light the controllers saw was the result of the initial explosion causing a flare, which was part of the plane's standard equipment to ignite and separate from the plane. The explosion occurred 8 miles east of Longmont, Colorado, when the plane was approximately 10,800 feet above sea level, which was 5,782 feet above the terrain. 782 feet above the terrain. The report and the chemical analysis was not available until November 13th. But on November 7th, 6 days after the crash, the Chief of Investigations of the Civil Aeronautics Board had officially announced that there were indications that sabotage had been involved in the crash of United 629. He further asked the FBI to open a criminal investigation into the case, which they formally began the following day. There were initial concerns that a labor dispute may have been the motivation behind the bombing. Flight engineers had gone on strike, and Samuel Arthur, a married father of 2 who worked as a pilot for United, was brought on to serve as United 629's flight engineer at the last minute. Brad Bynum and his pregnant wife Carol were only on the doomed flight because their original flight had been canceled due to the strike. They were on their way home to Oregon from Amarillo, Texas, where they had been visiting Brad's to celebrate their first wedding anniversary. In addition to following up on the strike, the FBI began investigating everyone who had been on the plane, everyone who had reservations for the flight but canceled them just prior to it taking off, and everyone who still had a reservation for the flight but failed to report to board the plane. They looked into not only the passengers who boarded the plane at Denver, but everyone who had been on any part of the day's flight. Investigators were looking for indications that a passenger had brought the bomb onto the plane or that one of the passengers had been targeted, with whoever made the bomb disguising their murder with the larger tragedy. Insurance fraud was considered a possible motive for bringing down the plane. In 1955, commercial aviation was relatively new, and consumer confidence in flying was not as strong as it would ultimately become. It was therefore not unusual for people traveling by plane to purchase travel insurance before their trip. It would take time for authorities to search the records of every insurance company that offered flight insurance, but some policies on passengers of United 629 were quickly located. It was relatively common at the time for airports to have vending machines which dispensed flight insurance so passengers could purchase a policy to provide for their loved ones should their plane crash just before boarding. The passenger would insert a few quarters into the machine, which would then dispense the policy documents. The passenger would then fill out and sign the paperwork and deposit it through a slot into the same machine to be mailed out before they boarded their flight. Stapleton Airport had such a vending machine. 17 passengers aboard United 69 when it crashed had purchased these policies. The amounts provided by the policies ranged from $6,250 to the maximum amount offered, $62,500, which would be equivalent to more than $600,000 in 2021. An unlucky occurrence in Chicago proved fortuitous for investigators in Colorado as they tried to identify the source of the bomb. United Flight 69 was a daily scheduled flight from New York to Seattle that made stops in Chicago, Denver, and Portland. The crew changed in both Chicago and Denver. On the day of the crash, a baggage handler in Chicago lost his keys. He believed he lost them while loading Cargo Bay 4, a United 629, so the bag of Chandlers in Denver were contacted and asked to search that cargo bay for the lost keys. When the plane arrived at Stapleton Airport, everything was removed from Cargo Bay 4, with all the cargo not remaining in Denver being placed in other cargo holds so that the bay could be thoroughly searched. The baggage handlers never found the set of keys. As such, the only baggage in Cargo Bay for when the plane went down had originated in Denver, meaning the bomb had not been loaded onto the plane in New York or Chicago. Only a few pieces of passenger luggage had been put into the cargo bay at Denver. When they questioned the families of the victims, the FBI asked for a description of the items the passengers had been traveling with and the type of luggage they had carried them in. One of the bags known to have been loaded into Cargo Bay 4 was a large tattered suitcase reinforced with cables that belonged to a woman named Daisy King. 53-year-old Daisy owned a drive-in restaurant in West Denver and was traveling to visit her daughter Helen in Alaska for the holidays. Daisy had been required to pay a fee when she went to check her bag upon her arrival at the airport as the suitcase was 37 pounds over the airline's weight limit. Her family believed that the ammunition she was traveling with so that she could hunt caribou during her time in Alaska was a major reason why the bag had been so heavy. Almost none of the items Daisy's family believed to have been in the suitcase were found amongst the debris, and only the smallest of fragments of the suitcase were located. This suggested that Daisy's suitcase had been the piece of luggage closest to the explosion, potentially because it had contained the bomb. Numerous items belonging to Daisy King were located at the crash site. However, they were found on or near her body, and were small and important enough that it made sense that she would want to keep them with her during her flight rather than put them in her checked luggage. The items included $1,000 in traveler's checks, a list of addresses, personal letters, keys to and receipts for safety deposit boxes, and newspaper clippings about various members of her family. The clippings concerning Daisy's son, Jack, however, were not pleasant pieces of memorabilia, as they did not describe his accomplishments, but rather his criminal past. John Gilbert Graham, known as Jack, was born on January 23, 1932, the second of his mother Daisy's children. He had an older half-sister named Helen from his mother's first marriage. At the age of 16, Jack struck out on his own, forging his identity documents to say that he was older so that he could join the Coast Guard. He served from April of 1948 until January of 1949, and he was last stationed at the Coast Guard installation at Croton, Connecticut. He was honorably discharged after his true age was discovered, but a notation in his records shows that he had been absent without leave for 63 days during his time of service, meaning he was AWOL for almost a quarter of the time he was with the Coast Guard. Jack eventually returned to Denver and took a job as a payroll clerk at a manufacturing company. In March of 1951, he stole a checkbook from his employer and began forging the company owner's signature and cashing the checks at various businesses throughout Denver, ultimately stealing more than $4,000 the company. He spent the majority of the money he stole on alcohol and women. The rest of it was used to buy a convertible, which Jack soon used to leave town. Jack's whereabouts during the next several months are unknown, but he ultimately ended up in Lubbock, Texas, where he was arrested on September 11, 1951 for hauling whiskey in violation of Texas laws. Jack was only arrested after he ran a roadblock driving over 100 miles an hour and was shot at by authorities. He was then convicted on the bootlegging charge and spent 60 days in county jail. He was then released to the Denver County District Attorney's Office to face a forgery charge related to the bad checks and money he stole from his former employer. He was convicted of the forgery charge in November, but was only given a sentence of 5 years probation after his mother paid back $25,100 in restitution, and he agreed to pay back the remaining balance in installments. Jack made his monthly payments and visits to the probation officer consistently over the following few years. However, Jack's probation reports state that he did not appreciate the seriousness of the charge he had been convicted of, and that his mother was highly overprotective of him. Jack worked mainly as a heavy equipment mechanic and received his high school diploma after passing the entrance examination for the University of Denver. He was only a student at the university briefly, leaving the school with no degree but with a wife, Gloria. Jack's stepfather, Earl King, died of heart disease on October 16, 1954, leaving his mother, Daisy King, a substantial estate consisting largely of property and various business interests. Following her husband's death, Daisy went to Marco Island, Florida, to tend to a home she now owned there. In February of 1955, Daisy returned to Denver because Jack and his wife, Gloria, had just welcomed their second child. Daisy then purchased a home on West Mississippi Avenue, which was primarily to be used as the family home for Jack, Gloria, and their children. Daisy did create a basement apartment in the home, where she would reside when she was not to check up on her various business interests. That May, she also opened the Crown A Drive-In restaurant on South Federal Boulevard and hired her son to manage it. The FBI had interviewed hundreds of people connected to the passengers of United 629, searching for potential motives to harm one of them. This included friends, co-workers, and neighbors of Daisy King. At least 3 different people had told the FBI to investigate Jack Graham. While Daisy had provided Jack with a home and a business, the relationship she had with her son grew worse as their lives became more intertwined. Witnesses reported that Jack and Daisy fought like cats and dogs over business matters, and that Jack may have been stealing from the drive-in. Insurance money seems like an obvious motive for Jack to kill his mother. He initially told the FBI that he had purchased 3 flight insurance policies, all paying out the smallest amount offered at the airport. He, his half-sister Helen, and his aunt each were the beneficiaries of one of the policies. However, the FBI would discover the duplicates of these policies hidden in Jack's home during a search of it. While 2 of the policies were for the minimum amount of $6,250, the third, which listed Jack Graham as the beneficiary, was in fact for $37,500. Jack was also suspected of perpetrating other, smaller insurance schemes in the months before the plane crash. In July, his new Chevrolet pickup truck was hit by a train just after Jack jumped out of it. Jack claimed that the vehicle had stalled on the tracks. He tried to convince his insurance company to pay him cash for the damages, but they refused, only paying for the repairs directly. Then in early September, an explosion at the Crown resulted in over $1,200 worth of damage to the restaurant. In the early morning hours of Labor Day, someone unscrewed a fitting on the establishment's gas line, which ultimately resulted in the explosion once the accumulation of gas inside the restaurant reached the pilot light of its water heater. A few dollars worth of change had also been taken from the register, and several pieces of furniture had been broken prior to the explosion. Authorities and the insurance company were suspicious of the incident, but the insurance claim was ultimately paid and no arrests were made. The restaurant had still not reopened at the time of the crash of United 629, and Daisy was reportedly considering selling it. Other witnesses had reported to the FBI that Jack may have placed something in his mother's suitcase, a fact which he himself had not revealed in his initial interview with agents, when he claimed to have no knowledge of what was in her luggage beyond the ammunition she was bringing for caribou hunting. Jack's wife, Gloria, told the FBI that on the day her mother-in-law boarded her flight, she had seen Jack walk into their home with a gift-wrapped package that was approximately 18 inches in length, 14 inches in width, and 3 inches in depth. Gloria assumed that the gift was a tool set used for making jewelry. Jack had told her, and one of their neighbors, that he wanted to purchase such a set of tools for his mother as a Christmas present because she enjoyed crafting items like small shells into pieces of jewelry. Gloria did not see her husband give the gift to his mother, but assumed he had, as she had seen him take it to the basement where Daisy had been packing for her trip. The FBI grew increasingly suspicious of Jack Graham as the investigation went on. On Saturday, November 12th, 11 days after the plane crash, they called him and asked him to come to their office the following day to identify some of the small fragments of luggage believed to have come from his mother's bags. Jack and Gloria Graham arrived at the office the following day around noon, still dressed in their Sunday best from church that morning. After they identified the luggage fragments, agents informed Gloria that they wished to speak to her husband further about the investigation, but that she could return home to her 2 young children, which she did. The FBI agents then questioned Jack about the Christmas gift for his mother. Jack claimed that he had never purchased the tool set he had been talking about because he had learned that the set would not work for Daisy's specific needs. Seemingly unaware that his wife seen him with the wrapped package and told the agents about it, he claimed that Gloria must have just assumed he purchased the set simply because he had previously discussed it with her. Jack was also questioned about the travel insurance policies on his mother's life purchased at the airport just prior to her boarding the plane. Jack claimed that he must have thrown the policies in the trash at the airport because he had never received the policy naming him as the beneficiary in the mail as he should have. FBI agents then went to the Graham home and obtained a signed statement from Gloria specifically about the details of her previous statement that did not line up with the information her husband was now providing. Jack was then presented with this statement and told that, based on the discrepancies between his statements and his wife's, he was being considered a suspect in the bombing of United 629. Miranda rights and the Miranda warning, as we know them today, would not exist for more than another decade after Jack Graham's interrogation, but he was advised that he did not have to speak with the FBI agents and that any statements he did make could be used against him in court. He was also told that he had the right to request an attorney at any time, but he never chose to. Jack did sign a statement saying he would take a polygraph examination and another consenting to a search of his home, property, and automobiles. The searches were carried out immediately. It was during this search of his home that the travel insurance policy valued at $37,500 was found hidden in a chest in a bedroom. Agents also found a small roll of copper wire with yellow insulation, consistent with the type used in primer caps in the shirt pocket of Jack's work clothes. FBI agents spent the next several hours interviewing Jack, sending out other agents to investigate what he said, and then presenting him with evidence disproving what he had told them. This cycle repeated several times. When Jack was presented with the evidence from the FBI laboratory about the fragments of wreckage recovered from the crash scene, Jack confessed, but not to the bombing of the plane. Rather, he admitted to causing the explosion at the drive-in and to intentionally letting his truck be struck by a train. Just after midnight, Agent James R. Wagoner told Jack, "You've been lying to us all night. We are going to charge you with this crime. Why not make it easy for us?" Jack replied simply, "Where do you want me to start?" and confessed to building the bomb and causing the crash of United 629. He would sign a 5-page statement confessing to his involvement. Between the statement Jack made that night, later confessions to prison psychiatrists, and statements made by Gloria Graham, we have a fairly detailed account of Jack's actions in the hours just before and just after the bombing. Jack had been working as a mechanic on the graveyard shift following the explosion at the drive-in, so he had spent most of the day of November 1st, 1955 sleeping after a shift at work. He woke up just before 5 p.m. and began preparing to take his mother to the airport for her flight. Because she would be in Alaska for so long, Daisy was going to store her 1955 Chevrolet at the Denver Motor Hotel while she was away. Jack sent his family with Daisy in her car, telling his mother to leave her luggage for him to load into his car before he followed. After his family left in Daisy's car, Jack opened his mother's suitcase. He removed her bathrobe and a quilted lavender bag, which held Jack's wedding pictures, and 2 antique brass lasks from the suitcase. In place of those items, he placed a bomb he had previously constructed, which was made of 25 sticks of dynamite, 2 blasting caps, a timer, and a 6-volt battery. 1 stick of dynamite would have been enough to bring down the plane his mother was about to board. He included 2 blasting caps, just in case one failed. Jack then loaded the luggage into his own car and began driving to meet his family. They got into his car at the motor hotel and began driving to the airport. Daisy thought it took her son too long to finally meet them at the motor and was concerned he was going to make her miss her 6:30 flight. When they reached the airport, Jack dropped Daisy, Gloria, and his children off at the terminal before going to park his car. As Jack was taking his mother's luggage out of the car, he reached into his mother's suitcase and turned the dial on the timer connected to the bomb. He brought the suitcase into the airport and carried it to the check-in desk for his mother. Daisy was upset to learn the bag was 37 pounds over the airline's weight limit, and she would be required to pay a $27 fine in order to have it loaded onto the plane. She briefly considered removing some of the items from the suitcase and having them shipped to Alaska, but Jack convinced her that she would need all of her things upon her arrival. Daisy paid the fee, and the suitcase was loaded into Cargo Bay 4 of United 629. After purchasing flight insurance at the airport's vending machine, the family went to the boarding gate. There, Gloria Graham recognized Sally Schofield, with whom she had attended a Methodist church camp a few years earlier. 24-year-old Sally was less than a month away from her wedding to a pilot for United. Sally also worked for the airline as a stewardess, but was off-duty and traveling as a passenger that day. She was traveling with another off-duty stewardess, Barbara Cruz, to Barbara's hometown of Seattle. Jack, Gloria, and their children watched Daisy board her plane and went to the observation deck to watch it take off. They then went to dinner in the airport coffee shop. After he ate, Jack went to the bathroom and threw up. As the Grahams were leaving, they overheard an employee mention something about a plane crash. When they asked him about it, he had no further information beyond the fact that he had heard that the plane had been flying for United. Jack called the airline after he arrived home to confirm his mother's plane had in fact gone down. He was the first relative of a United 629 passenger to inquire about the fate of the flight. An airline official informed him that United 629 had in fact crashed and that all on board, including his mother, were presumed dead. "Well, that's the way it goes," Jack said in response to the news. The United agent called the Graham home back half an hour later to obtain more information about King. Gloria Graham answered the call. When the agent asked to speak with her husband, she told him Jack was unavailable. He had gone to bed right after being told of his mother's death and was already sound asleep. Based on the nature of criminal history and his admitted propensity for insurance fraud, money would appear to be his obvious motive for bombing the plane. In addition to the insurance policy, Jack also stood to inherit a large portion of his mother's estate upon her death. Daisy's estate was valued at between $100,000 and $150,000, which will be equivalent to $1 million to $1,500,000 today. While the money he would receive if his mother died almost certainly played a role in his decision to bomb the plane, he also had a personal motive to want to kill his mother. When describing watching the plane take off, knowing that his mother and everyone else on board it would soon be dead, he told the FBI agents, "I watched her go off for the last time. I felt happier than I ever felt in my life." While Daisy was involved in almost every aspect of Jack's life at the time of her death, she had not consistently been active in her son's life, a fact which had caused Jack a great deal of distress as a child and resulted in years of resentment towards his mother. Jack's father, William Graham, had been Daisy's second husband. He died when Jack was 3 years old, although he had separated from Daisy more than a year before his death. Jack had been sent to live with his grandmother following his parents' separation so that his mother could take what work she could find during the Great Depression, and his half-sister Helen was taken in by a religious school. After Jack's grandmother passed away, he was sent to the Clayton College for Boys, an orphanage for fatherless boys in Denver. While the orphanage was considered progressive at the time and offered the boys who lived there an education and some degree of freedom, Jack wanted to be reunited with his mother, Daisy. Daisy's financial situation Daisy's financial situation improved greatly in 1941 when she married a wealthy rancher named Earl King. Jack ran away from the orphanage to try to reunite with his mother several times, but she would always send him back. Jack was allowed to spend holiday breaks with his mother at his stepfather's ranch, but would always be sent back to the orphanage when classes started again. The amount of time and money Daisy would put into her relationship with her son as he got older seemingly did little to make up for her absence from his younger life. The number of lives he would take in his pursuit of revenge against his mother meant nothing to Jack. Jack was aware that 50 or 60 people could be carried on the plane, but the number of people to be killed made no difference to me, he would later tell prison psychiatrists. Could have been a 1,000. When their time comes, there is nothing they can do about it. In 1955, there were no federal laws prohibiting the bombing of a commercial aircraft. The only charge the FBI could bring against Jack Graham was sabotaging an aircraft during peacetime. On November 14, 1955, a special agent from the FBI filed a complaint before the U.S. Commissioner in Denver charging Jack Graham with sabotage. Jack could not make his bond and remained in custody. However, this charge carried a maximum sentence of 10 years, hardly an acceptable prison term for a bombing that took 44 lives. Therefore, federal authorities agreed to turn Jack over to the state of Colorado. On November 17th, he was charged in the state court with the murder of his mother and held without bond. While this single murder charge did not address the full scope of the crimes Jack committed, it would make him eligible for the death penalty, were he successfully convicted of it. The bombing of United 629 did not go exactly as Jack had planned. The plane had taken off 22 minutes later than scheduled because it was waiting for a passenger. Harold Sandstead, President Eisenhower's Deputy Secretary for Public Health, was booked on United 629. He had been traveling to make a speech at the University of Oregon. His flight into Denver from Washington, D.C. had been delayed, so United 629 waited in Denver until he arrived and made his connection. If United 629 had taken off on schedule, the timer would have gone off and the bomb would have exploded while the plane was over the Medicine Bow Mountains. United had lost another plane to a crash on October 6, 1955, when United 409 crashed into Medicine Bow Peak, killing all 66 people on board. United had also lost 2 other planes in that mountain range in the past decade. If the plane had gone down in the mountains, the crash site may not have been accessible until the following spring, compromising the evidence and potentially obscuring the true cause of the crash. The ongoing investigation after Jack's arrest would show that he had begun making preparations to bring down United 69 within days of the most recent United crash in the mountains. Jack had approached the owner of an electrical company asking for a job, which he said he would work for only a nominal amount of money in hopes of gaining more experience in the electrical field. The owner agreed to employ Jack for a week, and when that term was over, Jack asked him several questions about how to obtain a timer that worked with a battery and did not go beyond 2 hours. The owner advised him on what to ask for at the appliance store. Authorities were also able to track down the locations where Jack had purchased the various components of the bomb, like the dynamite, and the merchants were able to identify Jack or pick his picture out of a lineup as the person they had sold the materials to in October of 1955. Investigators also learned that Jack had ranted to a credit manager from Chevrolet about how easy it would be to blow up a plane and how he had observed the baggage handling operation Stapleton Airport and believed getting a bomb on board a plane would be a simple endeavor. He made these statements after being unable to pay the $50 deductible on his insurance policy following his truck being hit by a train. In the incident, he would later admit to have orchestrated intentionally. He told the credit manager he could not make the payment because his bank account was a joint account with his mother and the funds were tied up. According to Jack's half-sister Helen, following the plane crash, Jack had made jokes both to her and to Gloria Graham about the shotgun shells in their mother's luggage going off inside of the plane and everyone on board jumping around to avoid them before the plane went down. Such insensitive remarks from her half-brother had not been shocking to Helen. However, as for the past several years she had not wanted to be around Jack because she knew him to be mentally unstable and violent. Jack had lived with Helen and her husband for a time in Alaska after he found a job there, and he had relayed to her one day that after he grew frustrated because he was having difficulty loosening a bolt from a piece of equipment, he had instead found a stick of dynamite and simply blown it off. Jack had also attacked Helen on 2 separate occasions. He had tried to attack her with a hammer before she was able to lock herself in a room to get away from him on one, and he had knocked her down on the other, kneeing her in the chest with such force that it damaged her ribs. Just a few months before the plane crash, Helen had witnessed Jack exhibit similar violent and irrational behavior towards his wife Gloria. Jack had gone to sleep, and Gloria was not with him when he woke up. She had been playing cards with Helen and Daisy. When Jack found her, he hit her several times and made his mother fear that he would strike her as well. While Jack confessed to the bombing, he quickly changed his story, recanting the confession in an interview that appeared in the Rocky Mountain News just 4 days after he made it. Jack was arraigned on the murder charge in Denver District Court on December 9, 1955, and entered pleas of innocent and innocent by reason of insanity before, during, and after the alleged commission of the crime. However, only pleas of innocent and innocent by reason of insanity at the time of the alleged crime were accepted by the court. Jack was then sent to a psychiatric hospital where he was ordered to be examined by 4 psychiatrists, 2 chosen by his defense team and 2 appointed by the court. During one of these evaluations, he maintained his innocence and provided a bizarre explanation as to why he had said he was responsible for bombing United 629. Jack claimed that he had gotten the idea to confess to bombing the plane with dynamite from a picture hanging in the office he had been in at the time. The picture showed FBI agents digging up a hidden supply of explosives after apprehending Nazi saboteurs in Florida during World War II. All 4 psychiatrists found Jack to be legally sane. Jack was then returned to the Denver County Jail, where he remained for several weeks and was a model prisoner. However, he then attempted suicide on February 10, 1956, and was transferred to the psychiatric ward at Colorado General Hospital. During his time at the hospital, Jack reverted back to taking credit for the bombing of United 69. He was very open with the psychiatrists about his guilt in the crime, his motives for committing it, his feelings about killing so many people, and the details of how he had carried out the bombing. Jack did not change his plea in court, however, and his trial began in April of 1956. The case set a Colorado state record for the number of jurors examined for a trial, with 231 jurors questioned before the 12 jurors, 7 men and 5 women, were selected. A major contributing factor to this large number of potential jurors was the extensive coverage the case had on the media, which had led to many people already having a firm opinion about Jack's guilt or innocence. Public interest in the case was still high when the trial began, with members of all forms of the media making special preparations to cover it. The trial was one of the first in the United States in which television cameras were allowed inside of the courtroom, although they were not allowed to broadcast live. Every day, hundreds of people spent hours waiting outside the courtroom clamoring for a seat inside. The guard at the door did save 1 seat every day for a young woman who arrived promptly at 9 a.m. each day of the trial. She was the widow of one of the pilots of United 629. The prosecution called more than 80 witnesses and entered 174 exhibits into evidence. Jack's initial 5-page confession was read aloud in court, and witnesses provided testimony about his contradictory statements and incriminating purchases. Members of the ground crew at the airport confirmed that the plane had been in proper working order at takeoff, and members of the Civil Aeronautics Board, representatives of the Douglas Aircraft Corporation, and employees of United Airlines detailed the collection and preservation of the pieces of wreckage from the crash site, and how they had determined where the explosion had originated. An expert from the FBI laboratory testified to the laboratory's identification of the chemical residue and battery fragments. The prosecution's case was detailed and thorough. The defense case was far less robust, and they only had 8 witnesses to call. With few other options, Jack's lawyers did attempt to have evidence and testimony from the FBI excluded from the trial. On 9th day of the trial, they were granted a hearing in federal court, during which they argued that the evidence provided by the FBI had been illegally obtained because Jack had not been advised of his rights before he was questioned and his property was searched. FBI agents testified that he had been advised of his rights and provided 8 waivers signed by Jack before any searches were conducted. The judge dismissed the motion and the proceedings in state court continued. Jack Graham had made grandiose claims to the press before his trial began about how his testimony would refute all of the evidence against him and prove his innocence. He ultimately did not testify at the trial. On May 4, 1956, the jury returned with a verdict after deliberating for just 69 minutes. They found Jack Gilbert Graham guilty of his mother's murder. He was sentenced to die in the gas chamber. Jack's conviction did little to ruin the calm and disinterested mood he had maintained throughout his trial. It also failed to inspire any pity for his victims in him. Following his conviction, he told a reporter from Time magazine, "As far as feeling remorse for those people, I can't help it. Everybody pays their way and takes their chances. That's just the way it goes." Jack had seemingly no interest in delaying his execution, but his attorneys filed motions and appeals on his behalf against his wishes. When they tried to get Jack a new trial, Jack took the stand and told the judge he did not want a new trial or for his conviction to be reviewed by the state Supreme Court. Jack's execution was stayed after his attorneys filed another appeal without his consent, but the Colorado Supreme Court upheld Jack's conviction and set his execution for January of 1957. While the bombing of United 629 would have a profound and devastating impact on the loved ones its passengers left behind for the rest of their lives, the life of the man responsible for it would end just 14 months after the plane was brought down. On Friday, January 11, 1957, Jack was taken to the gas chamber at the Colorado State Penitentiary. He was stripped down to his underwear, had a black mask placed over his eyes, and was strapped to a steel chair. Warden Harry Tinsley said God bless Jack after he strapped him to the chair, and Jack responded with thank you. After the gas was released into the chamber, Jack began coughing and then screaming before succumbing to the gas. He died 11 minutes after the gas entered the chamber, his death mirroring the deaths of his 44 victims who were senselessly killed when an explosion brought down their plane 11 minutes after it took off. Around 5 p.m. on June 17, 2013, a young man was jogging through an industrial park in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, when something unusual caught his eye. Investigating further, he discovered the body of a young man, later identified as 27-year-old Odin Lloyd. An autopsy revealed that Lloyd had been fatally shot 6 times. By the following day, June 18th, authorities had connected Odin Lloyd to 23-year-old Aaron Hernandez, a local football star. Hernandez was an NFL tight end, drafted by the New England Patriots in the 4th round in 2010. He was engaged to Shelley-Anne Jenkins, his partner since 2007. They welcomed a daughter in 2012 and had been living together since 2011. Hernandez had met Odin Lloyd through Shelley-Anne, as Lloyd was dating her sister, Shania Jenkins. The two were reported to have become fast friends. Police would later find surveillance footage of Odin Lloyd getting into a car with Hernandez on the morning of June 17th with 2 other men later identified as Carlos Ortiz and Ernest Wallace. Phone records would show that Hernandez had contacted Wallace the day before the shooting asking him to come to his house. Police looked into the rental car that had been seen on security camera footage, and they found the vehicle belonged to a local enterprise rental company. They located the vehicle and dusted it for prints and checked for additional evidence. After this, Aaron Hernandez was served with a search warrant for his home, and when asked to relinquish his cell phone, he gave them a broken phone. Police also questioned why Hernandez had his house cleaners come on June 17th, the day Odin's body was discovered and not the normal cleaning day. DNA found at the scene connected Hernandez to the crime scene. A wad of bubble gum was found on one of the shell casings found at the scene. The prosecution was gathering a substantial amount of evidence, all of which pointed to Aaron Hernandez. Hernandez was arrested on June 26, 2013, and charged with first-degree murder. The New England Patriots released him that day from his contract. The New England Patriots would also do an unheard-of jersey exchange in July 2013, offering people the opportunity to exchange their Hernandez jerseys for something else, and 100 showed up to do so. Police believe that Aaron Hernandez and his friends picked Odin Lloyd up early on June 17th to hang out as they often did. However, Hernandez had other plans. They drove him out to the industrial park, had Lloyd get out of the vehicle before they shot him 6 times. then spat his gum on the ground before driving back to his house, leaving Lloyd there. And a lot of what happened that day is still unknown, as witnesses and Hernandez have not talked about the actual events. The case would move quickly after the arrest of Ortiz and Wallace on June 27, 2013. Initially, they were charged as accessories to murder. However, later they were charged with first-degree murder as well. Walls would go to trial and be acquitted for murder, but convicted of being an accessory after the fact. He was sentenced to 4.5 years to 7 years in prison. Ortiz would change his plea to guilty and be convicted of accessory after the fact. He was also sentenced to 4.5 to 7 years. Next would be Tanya Singleton, a cousin of Hernandez. They connected her to the crimes via a car that may have been involved in another incident from 2012. Singleton also refused to testify against Hernandez. She was fighting cancer then. She would be indicted on charges of criminal contempt and conspiracy to commit accessory after the fact. She would plead guilty to criminal conduct and be put on probation, having to wear an ankle monitor. It had been reported that she died of cancer in 2015. Hernandez would plead not guilty. His trial would start on January 9, 2015. While awaiting trial, evidence would come up of Hernandez's involvement in a double homicide in Boston. Hernandez would be indicted on the double homicide from Boston in 2014 and would also plead not guilty. In the Odin Lloyd case, he would be found guilty of first-degree murder on April 15, 2015. In Massachusetts, the only sentence for first-degree murder is life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was incarcerated in the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center. However, this was not the end of Aaron Hernandez's legal problems. He would be indicted in a shooting from 2013 of a man named Alexander Bradley, who was a friend of Hernandez. It's believed that he shot him because he was involved with Hernandez in the 2012 double homicide in Boston. Alexander Bradley had been shot in the face, losing an eye, but survived the attack. On April 14, 2017, Hernandez was found not guilty of the double murder. But 5 days later, Aaron Hernandez was found dead, hanging in his cell. He used a bedsheet to commit suicide. At the time, prison officials did not consider him a suicide risk, and he'd not been put on round-the-clock watch. After his death, they did an autopsy, and they would find that Hernandez had a severe case, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, also known as CTE, which is a brain condition thought to be linked to repeated head injuries and blows to the head. It slowly gets worse over time and leads to dementia, but the right help with treatment and support can manage the symptoms. It is believed that this may have attributed to his declining mental health and his suicide. After his death, his lawyers filed a motion to vacate his conviction, citing abatement ab initio. Under Massachusetts law, this principle asserts that when a criminal defendant dies but has not exhausted all legal appeals, the case reverts to a status at the beginning. The conviction is vacated. The defendant is rendered innocent. Hernandez had been in the process of appealing the Odin Lloyd conviction. The motion was initially granted in May 2017, however. The conviction was later reinstated in 2019 by the Supreme Court, stating that ab initio is outdated. After his death, reports would come out that Hernandez had been secretly gay and had come out to his mother and girlfriend while in jail. An old high school classmate would confirm that they had a relationship during high school. Hernandez was deeply ashamed of his attraction to men. He had been sexually abused as a child by a babysitter for years, and while on prison calls, he often went on homophobic rants. His self-hatred got worse with the decline of his mental health. After his incarceration, he also became deeply religious. It was an aspect of his life that he struggled with: the childhood trauma, his sexuality, and his religious beliefs. There have been some speculation on whether Odin Lloyd had found out either about the double homicide or Hernandez hiding his sexuality, and that may have been the motive for the murder. However, it is also revealed that Hernandez abused illicit substances, especially during the off-season, and was prone to bouts of paranoia, mood swings, and violent agitation. We will likely never know what happened that prompted the murder of Odin Lloyd. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.